our children to watch the parade, because I believe that the Independence Day parade, like Christmas in the park, is a part of what is Barbadian. That is our time to showcase our excellence. That's our time to showcase our pride as a country, and our pride in our armed forces, and our pride in our guides and scouts and pathfinders and everybody. And it was interesting being in government this time. So first of all, I had to fight for a seat. I had a seat held for me. So that was a novel thing. But more than that, it was the thought that went in to the parade and all the associated activities. I heard some people before the parade complaining that it was at Kensington. But if people have been paying attention over the years, one of the biggest complaints with the parade is that the spectators can't properly see. Invariably, they're behind the tents, the dignitaries' tents, or they're so far from the parade that they can only see what is right in front of them. So to have the opportunity for all of those multiple school children and all the Barbadians who cared to attend to sit in comfort in a position where you could properly see everything that was going on, that added to the spectacle of it, and that was one of the reasons why it was so well received. The other thing I wish to say is that this is the first time in my life that I've ever heard the Prime Minister of Barbados being cheered upon, well, I say her in this situation, but upon the Prime Minister's arrival. So it gave me a good feeling. I left the parade and carried on for the whole of my weekend feeling good and proud to be Bajan. So once again, I would like to thank the member for the city and his team for the sterling effort and the magnificent spectacle that it eventually turned out to be. Thank you, sir. So from the pleasant and the warm to the unpleasant of this private member's resolution, I would like to thank the member for Christchurch South for bringing this resolution before the chamber. I was one of those persons who formed the last Public Accounts Committee, along with others in here. It was one of the most exhausting endeavors of my life. We met for almost 5 years. I cannot even tell you, sir, it has dulled to a painful memory the amount of times we sat down in that room, culminating and climaxing to when we were trying to finish the report to get it laid before Parliament. As Minister Simmons said, we sat down in there. As was said before, we sat down in the Senate chamber, and it was particularly dusty that day because the chamber needed cleaning and people were sick afterwards. I remember that. We sat down from 10 one morning to minutes to 3 the next morning to get this done. Not because we had a point to prove, but because it was important for it to be done. I heard the Honourable Leader of the Opposition speak, and I've heard the banter in the chambers. And I want to charge the Honourable Leader of the Opposition with something. The role of the opposition of Barbados was brought to bear and sharply in focus in the work of the Public Accounts Committee. It was said before, and I agree with it entirely, that the Public Accounts Committee is that check and balance to ensure that what is supposed to be done is done with the public purse and the coffers entrusted to a government. So I knew the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in his former association as a colleague of mine, while being in the same party. And at that point in time, he represented what was good, what was true, and what was right. And I do not believe that the fact that he now figuratively sits on the other side, to me, has changed the cores or the core principles with which he associated himself. So upon his shoulders now lie that heavy task to ensure that we now who form the government toe the line and don't get away with anything. And I have no doubt that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition will discharge that duty faithfully, and it is a task that I actually charge him to do for the reasons that will become apparent later. While forming part of the committee, a phrase came to mind that the righteous have nothing to fear. The righteous have nothing to fear. What is hidden from the wise and the prudent shall be revealed to the babe and the suckling. It is important that Barbados gets this chance to understand not just what is being laid, but why it is important that this be laid now with this government that came to office on integrity, transparency, and accountability. Because those were the principles that we said informed us in opposition and will inform us in government, as a government. It is also important that the public of Barbados now knows officially from us as a government the contents of the Public Accounts Committee report. It is important that this report form part of the enduring record of this honourable chamber, that anyone who chooses to avail themselves of its contents can see and remind themselves what happened over the last 10 years and why it should never happen again in Barbados. It is also important that the public of Barbados understands that the financial position that the country finds itself in now is directly related to the sort of behavior that was brought to light in this Public Accounts Committee report. Mr. Speaker, people need to understand and realize what happened over the last 10 years and why it was that this government had to do some of the things that we had to do. Barbados got out of hand. The government of the day got out of hand. And if the head is bad, the whole body is bad. The contempt showed for the Public Accounts Committee by those who formed part of the cabinet of Barbados emboldened public officers to equally and even more disrespect the function of an official committee, arguably the most important subcommittee of Parliament. When ministers took it upon themselves to decide that they were not coming, that they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the committee, even when legal opinion pointed to the fact that they were so subject, when the ministers still chose to openly defy a summons from a properly constituted subcommittee of this Honourable House, then, sir, we had a problem. We had a problem. We have heard before anecdotal evidence and based soundly in fact of the perpetual sickness of a public official who was summoned. We sat down in that committee unable to believe what it was we were seeing, and we had to be careful. We had to be careful because in pursuit of trying to get to the truth of what happened and get to the bottom of things and some scandals, we had also to be careful to not impute dishonest motives to those who might be wrapped up in what was happening. But sir, we had a situation where there was a public officer who happened to be sick for the exact period between any summons served on her and the date of hearing of the Public Accounts Committee. It's not that she was sick for 3 years. It's that she had intermittent periods of sickness that coincided with the day after the summons and ended the day after the sitting of the Public Accounts Committee. And I was concerned for her, sir, because to my knowledge, or based on the timings, it could only have been stress, and maybe stress occasioned by a guilty conscience. But the point is, it was so blatant that it smacked of the disrespect showed by the members, the same members of the government who refused to come. Effectively, do as you want. There is nobody to make you answer for what it is that you were doing. And that behavior became apparent the deeper and deeper we delved into the financial aspects of the last government. Because it was not just the ministers, it was not just that one public official, it was pretty much across ministries. No fiscal responsibility, no responsibility for good governance, no adherence to the law in the award of contracts and in the expenditures from the government's purse. We shouldn't have to be here. We should not, as the new government trying to move forward, be here having to debate the scandals of the last administration, because this should properly have been laid during the currency of the last government. So it should have properly been laid and properly ventilated and properly debated before the last parliament. It should not be here. We did not go out on a witch hunt. People initially said that we're trying to witch hunt and we're trying to target certain people for election purposes. We didn't go on a witch hunt. We went simply to investigate and get to the bottom of what was happening. And not necessarily for the purpose of punishing those, but for the purpose of putting Barbados back on the right footing, to ensure that good governance once again was the order of the day in ministries and statutory corporations, to ensure that accountability in government became the order of the day and not the exception. So it is interesting that the report ends with a series of recommendations, 15 of them. I will actually go through each one when I come to that part. But because I'm not going to go into the evidence, I don't need to go into the evidence. The recommendations, this Bajans always say pick sense from nonsense. When I give you the recommendations, or when I discuss the recommendations from the floor of Parliament, the public of Barbados, who we have educated for free, from primary, nursery to tertiary, are well capable of picking the sense from nonsense. We went through 5 years of frustration in the Public Accounts Committee. I have never seen so many files missing. It is a wonder that the National Housing Corporation was able to conduct any business at all. If we required a document to prove some infelicity, or that was mentioned in relation to some infelicity, chances are the whole file was missing. If the file could be found, that document was not there. And that happened not once, not twice, but that was a feature of the Public Accounts Committee. People are missing. You could not get the public officers to attend. And in this, we're not supposed to call people's names from the floor of Parliament, but I have to call one name. I have to call one name, sir, for all the right reasons. There was a PS, Ronald Bascom, who attended before the Public Accounts Committee and gave honest, coherent, and thorough evidence. I have never seen one person so fully cooperate with anything. And the level of his cooperation cast into sharp relief the level of non-cooperation from most other people's summons. You know, when a man has nothing to hide, and a man has done nothing wrong, he's able to speak the truth to power, and he's able to cooperate fully. Well, I wish to applaud and commend Mr. Bascom for his assistance to the committee. There were others as well, but he started that ball rolling.
Well, I must say that the Ronald Bascom is a good St. George man. A good St. George man. I wish other people were like him.
I am sure, sir, he has some roots in Christchurch East, but we won't delve into his family tree. The other thing that perturbed me, sir, was what I call legal obstruction. I have always tried to conduct, in my other life as an attorney at law, I always try to conduct myself according to a certain standard. I know that the honourable member, other honourable members in here who share the same profession that I enjoy similar reputations. Our Attorney General enjoys such a reputation. So when we came to a point where officers of the court aided and abetted in the obstruction of the work of the committee, then it gave me a very, very heavy heart. On many occasions in my practice, I had cause to tell my clients, you're doing foolishness. I am not going to take that. I am here to give you legal guidance. I'm here to tell you what is right or wrong. If you're going on a path that my moral account cannot condone, then you go down that path by yourself. I will not follow you into foolishness. And sometimes it is necessary to tell your clients that. So, quite at a number of occasions during the sittings of the Public Accounts Committee, I was dismayed at the assistance given by attorneys to perpetuate the foolishness that was going on with some witnesses who refused to cooperate. Then, sir, came the scandal of the government itself. After the first hearing, when word of what transpired got out, the government sought very quickly to ensure no reporters were present and to effectively seal the hearings. When the Public Accounts Committee started to get into the meat and bones of what was going on in National Housing Corporation, the government sought to derail it by trying to revoke the legislation which establishes, the very legislation which establishes and governs the Public Accounts Committee. As a good St. George North boy, sir, as you keep saying that you are, you know you always had that one child whose parents might have had some money, so you're playing cricket, and that child owned the bat and the ball, and if you get that child out, and they don't want to let go, they take up their bat and ball and go home and cricket done. That is what the behavior of the last government reminded me of. Rather than take what was happening as an opportunity to learn from the mistakes, identify mistakes, correct them. Because I think the last government might have had more currency with the public had they acknowledged mistakes and corrected them than had they been held back at all costs to stop it. It looked bad. It looked bad that the government sought to abolish the Public Accounts Committee. It resonated badly with the public, and it made us even more determined to do our work and report to the people of Barbados what transpired under the last government. Sir, if we go to page 11 of the report, it's captured there. I read paragraph 17. These procedural matters precipitated the decision by the government to repeal the Public Accounts Act, and accordingly a bill entitled the Public Accounts Committee Repeal Bill was laid in Parliament on the 30th of January 2014. This caused some uncertainty as to the future of the committee and the statutory framework under which it would operate, and accordingly there arose a hiatus in the calling of meetings for the next 5 months. Regrettably, this bill, though not yet debated, remains hanging like a sword of Damocles over the committee. Notwithstanding this, the committee resolved to continue with its work. Sir, I am confident that the Public Accounts Committee is here to stay. Having sat on the committee, maybe the Public Accounts Act may need some slight amendment, but nothing to suggest a repeal, with very, very simple amendments to bring efficacy to what it is that the committee is supposed to do. There is no good reason why this committee, under the chairmanship of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, cannot continue the good work of the last committee to secure proper procedures in statutory corporations and government entities, and to ensure that the government stays in line. Mr. Speaker, we had a situation where the evidence of the committee revealed that a minister actually told lies on cabinet, represented to a statutory body a decision of cabinet which in fact never happened. Over and over, we are hearing of outright instances of corruption, of decisions that made no sense unless somebody else was lining their pockets, of the abuse of statutory corporations, of the usurping of the functions of statutory boards. Effectively, sir, there were no rules. For the last 10 years, the government and the ministers did as they pleased with no accountability. Mr. Speaker, the last Barbados Labour Party Prime Minister was the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, and I know him to be an exceedingly serious person. The current Prime Minister of a Barbados Labour Party government is the Honourable Mia Amor Motley. I know no person more serious and hell-bent on doing what is right for Barbados than our current Prime Minister. I could not possibly imagine standing up or sitting in the cabinet of Barbados, it having come to the fore that I had misrepresented a decision of the cabinet of Barbados. To be honest, sir, before getting into government, I knew a cabinet existed. I knew that there was Parliament, there was House of Assembly, there was the Senate, there was a cabinet. But the full import of what the cabinet did only became apparent to me when I became a minister. And sir, the cabinet is perhaps the most serious body in the entire country. It is the most serious decision-making body in the whole of Barbados. There is no room in a cabinet for dishonesty. When we present in the cabinet wants to hear not just what it is that we as ministers are trying to do. They want to hear the pros and they want to hear the cons. And when you present in cabinet, you must equally represent the negatives of what you're proposing as you do for the positives, so the cabinet can make a full decision. I cannot fathom a fella lying on a decision of cabinet and then turning up next Thursday to take his seat again. Sir, I shouldn't talk. I can't go into details, and we're not allowed to discuss. The discussions of cabinet are private. But I can tell you this because it relates to me. Everybody knows we have the issues on the South Coast, and we're all out trying to make it work. We've recently commissioned an emergency outfall off Graham Hall. This happened maybe 2 Thursdays ago with an instruction to mobilize and get it completed in record time. I have never seen so fast a mobilization of government resources as was put behind constructing that temporary outfall. Anybody passing on the South Coast now will see plenty pipe on the beach, people working around the clock to get a pipe in place, divers marking out spots, a barge out there, construction going on, the area locked off, you're digging from the plant and laying other pipe from the plant down to the sluice gate. We have had a cohesion and coordinated approach that is probably only second to the Independence Day Parade. And by the time we finish, it will trump even that. That is not, sir, to feather my cap. Because that's the good part. But what our Prime Minister said to me in front of Cabinet, as she gave me the green light to do what is necessary, she said, but Minister, hear me clearly. Any lapses in procurement, any shady deals, anything that you cannot properly account for that causes the Auditor General to raise an eyebrow. That is my standard, sir. To raise an eyebrow. She made sure to point out to me, you are personally liable for it. She pointed out that the Barbados Water Authority is a statutory corporation and the decisions really come from the board. But she made sure to point out that although it is a statutory corporation and I'm not supposed to interfere in its process, I am still going to be liable if they step out of line in getting this done. Contrast that, sir. My standard was, if the Auditor General has occasion to raise an eyebrow, I am in trouble. Well, sir, the Auditor General raised an eyebrow, skin cuffings, waves, set off fireworks, pointing out what was happening in NHC. And nobody paid for it. Nobody paid for it. The Public Accounts Committee churned up evidence. Nobody paid for it. You have contract over contract over contract that overran. Nobody paid for it. You have people going on to work, thousands, hundreds of people going on to work at the NHC after the PS said the NHC was insolvent. After everybody knew the NHC could not pay its bills. Nobody paid for it. You had a dividend being declared from the Housing Credit Fund of $30 million. 30, I didn't say 30,000, I didn't say 30. I said $30 million. In a situation where the Housing Credit Fund never declared a dividend before. And sir, if it ever declares a dividend again, I resign from Cabinet too. But in a situation where a fund is set up, it is not supposed to generate a dividend. It's supposed to spend the money.
You must remember that the Housing Credit Fund is a revolving fund for housing.
Correct, sir. It is supposed to spend the money within the fund for the purpose for which it was created. It is not supposed to declare a dividend for the payment of a contractor. And that came, sir, that was as blatant as it gets. Nobody paid for that. Correct. Not yet. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it's opportune now to pause and just read the recommendations. Because it is important that this House understand what we worked to do and what it is that we as a government, then in opposition, proposed needed to be done. And my point, sir, is these were the recommendations coming out of the committee chaired by the now Prime Minister, the then leader of the opposition. If these are the recommendations we made then, I want to read them in because we cannot step aside from this. The same recommendations we made then have to bind us and every other government of Barbados from now. If any names, sir, happen to be called during the reading of the recommendations, so be it. But for me, to properly present the recommendations, I have to read every word, including names. Recommendation 1. The committee recommends that the House of Assembly take note of the findings with respect to the letter of February 18, 2013 from the Minister of Housing to the Chairman of the NHC, purporting to communicate a decision of Cabinet allegedly made on 14 February 2013, but which, on the basis of the confirmed minutes of Cabinet, was not made by Cabinet. The committee strongly deprecates this conduct of the then Minister of Housing, Michael Lashley, misrepresenting the decisions of Cabinet as it undermines the integrity of public administration in Barbados and the integrity of Cabinet governance itself. I pause, sir. The next one. The committee recommends that further action be taken by the appropriate organs of the government by way of investigation with a view to making further recommendations where appropriate and if necessary for the instituting of criminal and or civil proceedings against any individual whose conduct has caused the Crown to suffer any loss. The committee further recommends that where appropriate, all necessary legal steps be taken against individuals whose conduct has constituted misconduct in public office in order to recover any compensation due and owing to the Crown arising as a result of losses sustained from such misconduct. The committee recommends that ministers of government must not sign contracts purporting to bind the government and expose it to legal and or financial liability in the absence of the review and approval of the Solicitor General and or the Attorney General in the absence of the approval of Cabinet. The committee recommends that the Ministry of Finance complies at all times with the provisions of sections 31, 32, and 34 of the Financial Administration and Management Act with respect to transfers to statutory corporations and corporate entities. The committee recommends that the frame...
Is this number 5?
Sorry, sir. 1, 2, 3. There's 4 I'm reading now, sir. Is numbered according to paragraphs in here, sir. The committee recommends that the framework established for government procurement and the award of contracts laid down in the Financial Administration and Management Act and regulations thereunder be followed to the letter. The committee recommends that where statutory corporations are insolvent, that the board shall take no action to expand employment without the approval of the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of the Civil Service. The committee recommends that the Cabinet of Barbados pays due regard to the comments of the Ministry of Finance with respect to its Cabinet's decisions. This has implications of the capacity of the government to honor its commitments and service its financial obligations. So I pause there to make a point. Some of us in Cabinet have been frustrated when we're trying to get things done quickly, but we can't get our ministerial agendas pushed through because we have to await comments from finance, from economic affairs and investment, from associated ministry. The position that this government or our Cabinet has taken is where a decision in my ministry has implications for other ministries. Every other ministry so touched and concerned must have its chance to make recommendations or comments on it. I have had situations, sir, with the Honourable Member for Christchurch West. Because of his comments and his concerns has caused my paper to come back 2 and 3 times. And it was frustrating. But I understand that his concerns must be registered and addressed, because any decision that we take as a Cabinet of Barbados is a collective decision, and a decision taken by me binds each and every member of the Cabinet. It is their decision as well. So what I do reflects on them. And we've also taken the position that because of the precarious financial situation Barbados finds itself in as a direct consequence of the reckless, pocket and irresponsible behavior of the last administration, that all of the projects, anything we want to do has to resonate and has to get the approval of those responsible for rebalancing our economy and juggling our debt. These were the recommendations we made then, and we have already started to institute them. This report has not been laid before. It was attempted. We did not wait until this became laid or these proposals or recommendations therein are accepted. We govern ourselves. If it was wrong then, it is wrong now. If we recommended it right to be done then, we will do it now. The committee recommends that statutory corporations must follow proper corporate governance guidelines to ensure transparent decision-making by its board and directors and management. There must be clarity with respect to board decisions and board resolutions. This would entail giving the fullest regard to the policy decisions of central government while ensuring that the board properly discharges the fiduciary duties which it owes to the body corporate. The committee recommends that statutory corporations should at all times observe the highest standards of corporate governance and decision-making with an aim of ensuring the sustainability of the entity. Ministers cannot encourage boards to take foolish decisions that put the stability of the entity in peril. And I'm asking all the board chairmen and all the members of the boards who are listening, it is your responsibility when the minister attempts to give you a directive that you do not agree with, that is contrary to what the board was set up to do, and is contrary to good corporate governance. It is your responsibility to say no. To say no. Otherwise, you are complicit in what is going on. Ministers do not always get it right. It is for those who are responsible for the corporate entities to do what is right and proper in discharging their fiduciary responsibility to the corporate entity and to the government of Barbados. Do not be afraid to speak out. Right is right, wrong is wrong. The committee recommends that board chairmen must not act unilaterally in the exercise of their functions and or powers, and must at all times act pursuant to their duty to apprise other members of the board of any and all actions undertaken or statements made in the name of the board. Sir, this one is very important. I'm coming to the end. The committee recommends that ministers of the Crown be scrupulous and exacting in relation to their interaction with statutory boards falling under their ministerial purview, ensuring at all times that communication is conducted through appropriate channels, namely the permanent secretaries, the officials of the ministry. This extends to ministerial...
Remember, you have 3 minutes more.
I will read quickly. This extends to ministerial communication with third parties and interaction with statutory boards. This committee recommends that ministers of the Crown have due and precise regard to the statutory limitations on their powers insofar as the exercise of those powers relate to statutory corporations. The committee recommends that the fullest coercive powers of the House be brought to bear upon those persons who refuse to appear on summonses issued by the committee, in part to secure attendance, but also to reinforce the paramountcy of Parliament as the highest court in the land and to engender respect for its organs. The committee recommends that measures be urgently put in place with the appropriate penalties to ensure that all government files are properly maintained and stored in order to ensure that they remain available for reference at all times. Imagine we actually had to put that in a recommendation. The committee recommends that ministers must not interfere in the procurement and hiring processes of statutory corporations so as to usurp the functions of the board, notwithstanding that ministers are responsible for setting policy for the corporations. And finally, the committee recommends that in the interest of transparency and accountability, proceedings before the committee should be open to the public and also be made available to the public by way of live broadcast, streaming, or print and electronic media. Sir, in coming to an end, I just want to make it clear that what we recommended then binds us now. The difference between us and them is that we have gone swiftly to ensure the passage and take the steps preparatory to ensuring the passage of the Integrity in Public Life legislation. We are well on the way to having that piece of legislation finalized and laid before this Honourable Chamber. Sir, the difference between us and them should be apparent already to the people of Barbados. It should be apparent to a blind man on a galloping horse riding backwards through a fog. it bothers me, sir, when people say all politicians are the same. I am not the same as the man that I deposed. None of us in here are the same as the people that we had the honor to remove from public office and take their place to show Barbados what real government is and what real government is supposed to do. What happened over the last 10 years must never be allowed to happen again. And I sit, sir, with my final statement being that I fully support the private members bill laid today in Parliament. Sir, I thank you.
Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that further consideration of this resolution be postponed.
Question is that further consideration of this resolution be postponed. All members in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Of reports from select committees.
Member for Christchurch East.
Sir, as I would have stated a couple of minutes ago, we're in the process, the select committee, sir, is in the process of finalizing and collating all the information relating.
Which select? Which one?
The Integrity in Public Life Committee, sir. On the 6th of November, the chair of the committee, the Attorney General, requested an extension of 4 weeks, and that 4 weeks expires on the 5th of December. As the acting chair of that committee, sir, I'm pleased to report to this House that we've finished the bulk of the formal work. We have pretty much finished the collation of the sections and taken into consideration all of the suggestions made during the committee hearings. We require, sir, another possibly 4 weeks that the redrafted instructions can be properly communicated to CPC and a draft prepared for the final approval of the committee. So in the premises, sir, I'm humbly requesting a further month for the committee to complete its process. But I will say, sir, that at the end of it all, this Honourable Chamber and Barbados should be proud of perhaps one of the most comprehensive and publicly ventilated pieces of legislation ever to grace this Parliament. So I'm humbly requesting an extension of 4 more weeks, sir, to properly complete the process.
Really, you got to put the question. He recommended 4 more weeks. He recommended. Question is that 4 weeks be given to the committee to complete their work. All members in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. We think the ayes have it. Request is therefore granted.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, public business. In the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, to move the second reading of the Central Bank Amendment Bill 2018. Order number 3, sir.
Member for St. Michael South Central.
Mr. Speaker, the bill before this House reflects a small amendment to the Central Bank of Barbados Act, Cap 323C. And the amendment relates to Section 7 of the Act. Section 7 of the Central Bank of Barbados Act is amended, it is proposed in subsection 4 by deleting the word shall and substituting the word may. And I make reference now, sir, to the subsection. It reads, "The minister, notwithstanding any other provision of this act, shall cause to be transferred to the ownership of the bank non-negotiable, non-interest-bearing securities issued by the government for such an amount as is necessary for the purpose of preserving the paid-up capital from any impairment, whenever, in the judgment of the board, the assets of the bank are less than the sum of its liabilities and paid-up capital." And of course, I will explain the origin and what we are proposing as the need for the amendment. Now, as this House, and no doubt all the people of Barbados are aware, this government, in short order, having been called and mandated to service by the people of this country on May 24th, in short order got down to the very necessary, not always comfortable, but necessary business of rebalancing and right-sizing this economy and the institutions on which Barbados is based. And apart from the budgetary statement that was made in June by the Minister of Finance, shortly after that, we presented the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, which is ongoing, and which sought and seeks to address and correct the fiscal indiscipline of the last government over the last 10 years that had brought this country's economy to its knees. And the BERT plan, as we call it, was a combination of measures, remains a combination of measures to address these matters. We, as a government of Barbados, understanding that all previous and many previous suggestions when it came to addressing the economic issues in this country sought to focus on labor, sought to focus on putting the burden of the adjustment on regular people who go to work every day to try and provide for themselves and their families. And we thought, and we knew, and we continue to make the point and to bear it out in our policies, that labor cannot be the ones that carry the burden of this adjustment, and that this adjustment needs and needed to be shared across several actors in this economy. And so as a result of that, the BERT plan lays out several measures for the adjustment and for the recovery. These measures include expenditure reduction. They include revenue measures that fall not just on regular Barbadians, but overwhelmingly on visitors to our shores and on the tourism sector, which we felt could bear some of that adjustment. And it also related to a domestic and external debt restructuring, which was necessary in order to make sure that we did not place the full burden of the adjustment on regular Barbadians. And one of the major contributors, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to that debt restructuring was the Central Bank of Barbados. If the Central Bank of Barbados had not been itself a key part of the domestic part of restructuring our debt, and in that way making certain sacrifices with respect to its own balance sheet, there would have been more of a burden on pensioners and other creditors in this country. And so, having realized and acknowledging that the Central Bank of Barbados has taken on a big share of that adjustment burden, what this bill seeks to now do is to go further and to address any possible consequences of that adjustment. Now, in the context of the debt restructuring, we have had to do certain stress testing of the financial system in Barbados. And any responsible government will not just take measures and hope for the best, as we have seen over the last decade, but any responsible government has a duty to its financial institutions to make sure that they're not in jeopardy, to make sure that they can continue to function, that they remain solvent. And so what this bill seeks to do is to go further. It seeks and it proposes that if there is should there be any discomfort of the board of the Central Bank of Barbados with respect to the bank's own solvency, that the minister may respond by giving the bank zero-coupon bonds issued by the government as assets that the bank can use to maintain its solvency. And so we are effectively guaranteeing the solvency of the Central Bank of Barbados in the context and being aware of the fact that this is an institution that has taken on a key role in allowing us to spread the burden of the adjustment and to make sure that it does not just fall on pensioners, it does not just fall on labor, but that it is borne by us all. Now, the small amendment that we are discussing from shall to may seeks to address the fact that the government of Barbados needs to be able to maintain a certain level of flexibility in the way that it responds to the solvency issues of the Central Bank of Barbados. So while we guarantee the solvency of the bank, we also need to make sure that in a situation where the Central Bank may itself make decisions that may negatively affect its own solvency, that we expand the policy responses that the government of Barbados would have. And so it just seeks really to be able, in fact, to commit us further, to be able to say that we take very seriously the responsibility of the government of Barbados to ensure that its key financial institutions can function, and that further, we want to make sure that we as the government of Barbados have the flexibility to collaborate in that policy space with the central bank that allows it to maintain its solvency. Now, I want Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to take this opportunity to try and paint a broader picture of the Burke Plan and where we are. And this morning, we had the kickoff meeting with the first staff visit following the signing of the EFF agreement with the International Monetary Fund. And so they are here for a staff visit mission this week that wraps up by the end of the week. And as we started the discussions this morning, we reflected as a Barbados economic team with the fund on where we find ourselves and really how have we done so far with the Burke program, but not only how have we done in terms of the specific results, but what has been the environment created as a result of the reintroduction of fiscal discipline in this country. Now, there has been much discussion in the debate that preceded this one about the operation and the role and the behavior of certain state-owned enterprises, certain entities of government that must dispense basic services and have a duty to the people of Barbados to ensure that their financial and operational management is above board. And one of the things that we have been able to achieve and that we have spent a lot of time focusing on is to ensure that there is adequate and timely monthly financial reporting of state-owned enterprises. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we were in opposition and we on the other side had, especially in the last couple years of the last administration, we knew that things were going downhill fast. But one of the things that delayed us a bit in being able to jump quickly to certain conclusions was the lack of reliable information. And it was the fact that if you do not insist on accuracy of information, if you do not insist on the timely delivery and submission of financial statements and management accounts, then you can quite easily say that you didn't know. You can quite easily allow certain things to happen and be able to rely on the excuse of ignorance. This Barbados Labour Party government is not one that needs to rely on any excuses, and certainly not any excuses of ignorance. We have prioritized the availability and the transparency of the financial matters and operations of state-owned entities. And while I will get in a minute to other key results of the BERT plan that amendments such as this have allowed us to be able to move quickly on, I want to make the point that we intend that one of the lasting results, one of the lasting outcomes of this BERT plan is that it returns fiscal discipline and financial accountability to the way that government does business in Barbados. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where do we find ourselves? When we came to service at the end of May in 2018, not only did we find a debt to GDP ratio of close to 160% of GDP, and that's not counting arrears that were about 1.2 billion. Taxpayers were furthermore not getting their tax refunds, not getting their rebates. The University of the West Indies, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital were not getting the sums of money that were promised to them. What we had in the budgeting practices of the last government was an under-accounting, putting in sums of money in the estimates and in the budget that they knew full well could not meet the demands of key institutions that had to provide basic health and education services to the people of Barbados. And that is what we found. This, added together with the fact that the debts that were owing to these entities, what we were able to calculate as arrears meant that the true debt to GDP ratio of the country was about 175%, and we've said it over and over in this chamber. The third highest indebted in the world. Now, in 6 months, this is what we have done. Our debt restructuring, domestic debt restructuring, closed a couple weeks ago with an almost complete success of the debt exchange. When I say almost complete success, I mean that almost everyone to whom the exchange offer was made came into the exchange and allowed us to close. With respect to the external restructuring, which is ongoing, we are having discussions now to look at issues of net present value with the external committee, and we are confident that we will close quickly on the external as we did with the domestic. Recently, Standard & Poor's lifted our credit rating from D to B-, and our aim, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is to get back to single A, which is where Barbados has always been accustomed to being, and which is what we understand as the investor climate in this country. And we will get there. This month and in previous months, we have been current. And so it means that our deficit has been virtually eliminated. Our deficit has been virtually eliminated after a decade of unsustainable deficits. And what has this meant for us, sir? It means that we've been able to pay this year's income and VAT tax refunds and rebates, and checks have been going out over the last few weeks. It means that this is the first time that the government of Barbados has been current for 6 years. so next year, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, and over the next 10 years, we are going to run a primary surplus that will help us to bring our debt to GDP ratio down closer towards the 60% that we are targeting by 2033. So our new fiscal position has also allowed us to relook at the impact on pensioners of the debt restructuring and to decide, as you have seen, as this country has seen over the last few weeks, to bring forward the repayment of the first 250,000 of the bond holdings of those over the age of 60. Sir, I paint that picture in the context of this bill because these are the kinds of amendments that allow us to be able to make the decisions that will secure the financial health of this country, but also to make the decisions. You know, as a development economist, I say all the time that I am not in the business of moving around numbers. That is not why I studied economics, and it is not why I made the choice to come to service as a politician in this country. The reason that we are here and the reason that we are implementing the Burt Plan and are taking these sometimes difficult but necessary measures is that we are setting a platform for the future growth and transformation of this country. And I think that sometimes, because we are so focused on the recovery and on the adjustment, and we must be, we might momentarily lose sight of the transformation mandate. When the people of this country elected us overwhelmingly on May 24th, yes, they knew that recovery had to happen, but what was it that they really were looking forward to? They saw us, and I dare say continue to see us, sir, as the group of people that alongside them will help bring about the transformation of this country. And that is why we are here. And that is what measures such as this allow us to do. This morning, Luther Thorne Memorial School commemorated 35 years of existence. And I spent a little time with the students, chatting with them, and they had their balloons, 35 balloons that they thought, and it was on the program, that they thought they would be able to release. And in the conversation at the end, you know, they were a little bit frustrated. They wanted to be able to release these balloons and see them go up into the air. And I said to them, well, you know, that's terrible for the environment. When the balloons get away, who knows where they're going to end up? And they started to talk about and reflect on the fact, and this was generated by them and not by me, that really they are the ones who are responsible for Barbados. We here in this chamber are temporary caretakers who are handing this country over to them. But we have a duty and a responsibility to hand it over to them full of opportunity and full of possibilities such that they can be anything, such that there are no limits on their potential. And that is why we are here. And so we might make reference to net present value and to balance sheets and to solvency, and these are important things, but these are tools, sir, that allow us to make sure that we never return to the situation, the fiscal indiscipline that we saw in this country over the last 10 years, and that we make sure that when we leave, each of us, this chamber, that we have left for those children a world and a lifetime full of possibility. And so, in that respect, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I commend this bill to this House, and continue, through you, sir, to ask Barbadians to stay the course with us, because the transformation that they have entrusted to us is on the way and is in the future. I thank you, sir. I move, sir, that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you,
Member for St. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to make a, excuse me, a relatively brief contribution to this debate, this central bank, the consideration of this central bank amendment bill. I think I should first, on behalf of my colleagues, I'm not sure who else may contribute to the debate, but congratulate the economic team for the work that they have done, I would say, sir, in record time. That we are able to be at this stage in our recovery program is testament to the hard work spearheaded by the Honourable Prime Minister, the member for St. Michael North East, as well as the Honourable member for St. Michael South Central, and the Honourable member for Christchurch East Central. And they, along with their teams, have been doing an incredible job, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I think they ought to be commended for the work that they have done. The Central Bank of Barbados and any other central bank, whether it is so-called or referred to as a Federal Reserve, is essentially the monetary authority of the country. It is the institution that regulates and that governs what we call the money supply. And that is important because money supply and monetary policy in a country can determine a country's inflation rate, the rate at which prices increase in the economy over time. It can also, and we've seen it on a number of occasions in Barbados. I remember the first that I was aware of in just after 1986. The Honourable member for St. James Central and I, when we were much younger, battled against persons who would turn out to be destroyers of a country. But we didn't know that then. We were but students. But we sought to suggest to them, even as youngsters, that by putting so much money into the economy, it would negatively impact the foreign reserves of the country. And we were discussing, I think you would remember, you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, being a fully grown adult at that time, what was called the Richie Haynes back raise budget. I only call the name because it is part of a term. But the central bank of the country is responsible for ensuring that the monetary policy of the country does not result in runaway inflation, excessive inflation, and that it does not result in negative pressures being placed on the foreign reserves of the country. The Central Bank of Barbados is a regulator. It is a principal advisor to government through its governor. It is a regulator, and it does that by both regulating as well as using moral suasion to try to get the actors in the economy to operate in a particular way. And the Central Bank of Barbados, like every other central bank, is to act independently. It has no political position to advance, and it has a professional and fiduciary responsibility to itself as an institution, but also to the country that it is set up to serve. And I know that it is common knowledge that during the last decade, some of that independence was compromised. But this Barbados Labour Party government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is fully committed to strengthening the institutions of state that are set up and have been established to ensure that we have a well-ordered and well-governed society. And that is the stand, that is the position of this Barbados Labour Party government. As the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central would have alluded to earlier, this amendment speaks to the broader idea and the broader policy of the debt restructuring that government had to undertake and is in the process of undertaking as part of its rescue, the rescue aspect of its program. And that, as the Honourable Member would have indicated, is part of what we call the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. And I just want, for the purposes maybe of sharing with the public through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the reason why our program is not called a recovery program only, it is not called an economic adjustment program, but we have phrased, because we believe that words matter and that words convey thoughts and they express what we are thinking. And so this program is called the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, because this government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is strategic in its outlook and strategic in its thinking. This government realizes that even as we go through short and medium-term adjustments, there must be some view as to the kind of Barbados we want to materialize at the end of the process. And we want a Barbados economy, society, however it is termed, that has been transformed. We want that the economy, the society, the Barbados that arises out of the ashes of the last 10 years is a Barbados that is suitable, fit, that makes sense in the 21st century. And that is where we are going with our economic recovery and the transformation program. But as we speak about debt and debt restructuring, you will remember, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that very early on in our term of office, we made what was considered to be a very bold decision. This government made a decision to suspend debt payments. A bold decision, but a decision that was absolutely critical if we were to avoid a situation where the country ran out of foreign reserves completely. And after having made that decision, we immediately took a downgrade. But unlike the previous government, we did not take that decision not expecting the downgrade. We took the decision understanding we will have the downgrade because this Barbados Labour Party understands how to govern a country. We have done it successfully over many years in the past. It is, as I often say, part of our DNA to run and to manage the affairs of a country properly. And I think Barbadians are realizing that every time the other people, the ones who they just got rid of, every time they mess up royally, we have been called upon to put right the ship of state. And every time we have been called upon to do it, we deliver. And I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this turn at the crease, this opportunity again to serve and to manage, the results will be the same. And the people of Barbados can rest assured that at the end of this process, they will be not just observers of the transformation, but there will be participants in and beneficiaries of the transformation that will take place in this country. Now, the BERT program had really at its core the preserving of the value of our currency. And the value of that currency is, I don't want to use the word sacred, sacrosanct. I mean, it is something that Barbadians hold dearly to. Because Barbadians, as educated people, as sensible people, understand that the pain of a devaluation represents a place where they do not want to go. And I've been engaged in many discussions over the years as part of the tourism sector in consultations, usually under the Article 4 visits, with teams from the International Monetary Fund. And they, every time, say to us, we understand that as a country, you do not want to go in that direction. And so this program, this Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, was designed to save the value of the dollar, to maintain its parity to the United States dollar, 50 Barbados cents to one Barbados dollar to 50 United States cents, or 2 to 1 as we would say. This program included, and the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central would have referenced this before, revenue-raising measures, expenditure reduction measures, and then also the provision of financing. We've spoken about the revenue-raising measures before in this debate, and we've spoken about it before in other debates. But I want to reiterate, I think it bears re-emphasizing. The people that we represent must be reminded that the revenue-raising measures place a greater burden on tourism businesses and visitors to the country than it has on Barbadians. And it is because the same Barbados Labour Party that said through the election campaign that we care, the same Prime Minister who we know cares about this country and her people, we determined that the burden should not fall solely or even mainly or disproportionately on the people of Barbados, most of whom, almost all of whom, were innocent and in the terms of war would have been considered collateral damage. That is how the last government viewed them. Collateral damage, so whatever it took to rescue or turn around the economy, let the people suffer. That is not the mind, that is not the way of this Barbados Labour Party government. The matter of expenditure reduction is one that had to happen if we were to close the deficit, if we were to get to the point where we had the primary surplus that we wanted. And government's expenditure bill has a whole range of components. But the significant ones would be our interest expenditure and our wages and salaries. And in order not to place the burden of reducing expenditure on wages and salaries, because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, wages and salaries is not just a term, or as the lawyers would say, a term of art. Wages and salaries represent people, human beings, who have to support themselves, and not support themselves by buying fancy stuff. They have to buy food. They have to pay rent. They have to pay electricity and telephone bills. Real people. And wages and salaries reduction mean that people are impacted. And so this Barbados Labour Party government determined that the owners of capital, we were going to ask them to share in the process of reducing our expenditure. And therefore, that was the reason why the whole matter of debt restructuring came to the fore. Because we wanted that the burden of reducing government expenditure would not fall on human beings who would be impacted in terms of having to provide for themselves and provide for their families. Another aspect of the BERT program was the process of funds becoming available that government could use both to build capacity, strengthen institutions, but also to bolster its foreign exchange position. Because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, confidence within the country, the confidence that is needed to unlock investment and to drive economic activity, and even to cause people to be more comfortable as they go about their daily business, that confidence comes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from an understanding that the fundamentals in the economy are moving in the right direction. And as a result of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program being executed, and our partners at the IMF, and I use the word partners, not advisedly, I use it because I think we have come to the position where we understand that we are not now fighting against an institution. I attended a lecture, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West and myself and a few others, given by my predecessor as representative for the constituency of St. Peter. And where it was explained that the International Monetary Fund is not the kind of hawkish institution that it once was. So I use the word partners. But our partners in the fund have indicated to us that our plan, the plan of a party that understood what was about to happen and that started to put plans in place, they saw that program and they were able to give their assent to that program in record time in terms of the experience of the International Monetary Fund. And what are the results of the implementation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of this program? And I should maybe parenthetically indicate that this is our program. This is not the IMF's program. We presented a program to the IMF and they agreed that they could support it with an extended fund facility program from their end because of the well thought out, well put together, well structured nature of our plan. But the result of the implementation of this BERT program is a renewed investor confidence in Barbados. And so there are projects. There's going to be the Sandals project at Haywood's Beaches. The Sagicor has announced a project in St. George, I believe it is. And there are a number of other projects on the cards because as a result of the implementation of this Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, the investing public recognizes that we are serious, that we understand what we are doing, and that they can feel comfortable expending their resources with the reasonable expectation of some return in the future. And confidence and resulting investment is coming back to our economy. But one of the other results of the implementation of this program. And I just want to say to the people of Barbados, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this program is being implemented. We are on a journey, and we've been asking the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central said it quite well. We are asking the people of Barbados to stay with us on the journey. As part of the result of the implementation process that we are in with this program, we have seen multilateral lending institutions coming to the table asking us how they can help us get out of the hole that they are in. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I feel, well, you know, they cannot engage in politics, but I feel that if it was left up to some of the individuals, they probably would phrase it and ask, how can we help you get out of the situation that the last government put you in? But they can't say that. I don't even know if they're thinking it. But I believe that that is maybe what some of them would want to say. But they have come to the table and they have been offering us not just financing, but concessionary financing. Financing that will allow us to be able to clear the arrears, because the last government not just refused to give wage increases to the public sector, not just continually impose taxes without showing the people what was happening with the money, but the last government was not able to borrow any money because they presided over an unprecedented series of downgrades of the currency and the debt and everything of the country, while saying to the people that downgrades don't matter. They could not access any financing because we were at the point where our currency, we are people who say to everybody, based on the coat of arms that is affixed above your chair, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and based on what we feel in our heart, that we are a proud people, but we could get no money, we could access no financing because of the terrible mismanagement of the last government. But the multilateral agencies, and I think we have to thank the Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, who has, on behalf of the government, really spearheaded this effort, and I think ought to be commended for the amount of funds that has been made available to this country on concessionary rates. I indicated earlier that we took a decision to default on our debt. You know, I like to use the real words. I'm not a diplomat. And we defaulted. But like I said, we knew what we were doing. And so in 6 months after a downgrade that came from a default that we took, understanding what we were doing, Standard & Poor's is able to move us from D to B minus. They understand that we understand what we are doing. And they have said no to the international community, those folks in Barbados. The government of that country understands how to manage, and they are prepared to take one step back in order to take 3 or 4 steps forward. Because this government understands that sometimes tough decisions have to be made, but we will make tough decisions once they are in the best interest of the people of this country. The amendment to the Central Bank Act, I indicated earlier, speaks to, but I spoke about the institutions of government and how, but institutions of state, and how this government views them. This amendment reinforces the view that government first of all, appreciates the position that the central bank has taken in the debt restructuring, appreciates the fact that the central bank sees itself as a partner in the project of nation building, but that this government will ensure that the Central Bank of Barbados, a key institution in this country's economic landscape, will not be compromised. And this government will do whatever is necessary to mitigate any negativity, any issues that arise that will maybe put the central bank in any negative position. This government will take responsibility and will do whatever is necessary to make sure that the Central Bank of Barbados remains a strong, vibrant institution, one that can do its work as the regulator of the monetary policy of this country. That is what responsible government is all about. That is what good governance is all about. That is what this Barbados Labour Party government is all about. We would have heard the term fiscal fitness, and it is a term that the acting leader of government business is familiar with. Fitness speaks to health, it speaks to wellness. And this government is committed to ensuring that the economy is returned to fiscal fitness. That all of our actions as a government, as it relates to the people and the management of their affairs, to the economy and the management of the finances of this country, are handled with discipline, handled with integrity, handled in a way that redounds to the benefit of the country. Because our motto, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is a better life for our people. And we will continue to forge ahead on the path of creating a better life for our people. And part of that creation of a better life has to do with making sure that the institutions of state that have their specific responsibilities in the fiscal, in the monetary, in this case, business and activity of the country, and in other areas as well, we will ensure that these institutions remain viable, that they are strengthened, and that they remain or are put back into a position where they can contribute meaningfully to the development of this country. And so with those few words, I'm not going to take the extra minutes. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this central bank amendment bill. I commend it to the House, and I commend to this chamber and to the country the astute economic management demonstrated so far by this government, and assure the people of this country that we will continue to manage our affairs in a way that will not just make us as a people proud, but will redound to the benefit of the people of this country. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
First, make yourself central.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise just to briefly thank the Honourable Member for St. Peter for his support of this bill. As he was speaking, I was reflecting that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central and I better watch out, because the level of understanding of the issues might suggest to us that we may need to shift our services elsewhere. I don't know if the Ministry of Labour and Social Partnership Relations has space, but we may need to end up there. But I thank the Honourable Member for those words of support. In fact, his intervention and his focus on the origin of the BERT plan and in the context of the social partnership and the decision taken by the social partnership that the most important thing to do was to secure the value of the currency against devaluation. also reminded me of another milestone or another result that we've been able to realize. And he alluded to it as well in terms of his discussion of the multilateral financing. Now, when we came to service at the end of May, we found foreign reserves of 400 million, which is about 5 weeks of import cover. And as we've been saying over and over, the accepted minimum is about 12 weeks. And so based on the BERT plan and based on the fund's support of the plan and based on the overwhelming support of the international community and the multilateral community, by the end of this year, once we have secured the transfer of funds from the Inter-American Development Bank, that reserve position will have moved from 400 million at the end of May to almost $1 billion by the end of December this year. And that reserve position is important to be able to secure the value of our currency. And I think that is something through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I thought the people of Barbados needed to hear and needed to be assured of. And so with that brief close, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill now be read a second time.
Seconded. The question is that this bill be read a second time. All members in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
I beg to move, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that your Honour do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration.
Question seconded, please. Right. Question is that I do not leave the chair and this House resolve itself in committee. All members in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
Question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
Question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Deputy Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Seconded.
Question is that I now report to the Honourable Deputy Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committee has reported the passing of bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now be passed and be cited
Third time.
Oh, sorry. I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that this bill be read a third time. All members in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now be passed and be cited as the Central Bank Amendment Act number 2.
2018.
2018.
Question is that this bill be now passed and so cited. All members in favour say aye. Aye. This bill is now passed.
And so cited.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, that brings us to the end of government business for today and the end of the day's sitting. I now beg to move that this Honourable House be adjourned until Tuesday, 11th of December at 10 a.m.
Seconded. Question is that this House be now adjourned until Tuesday, 11th of December at 10 o'clock in the morning. All members in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This House is now adjourned until Tuesday, 11th of December at 10 a.m.